So as a 40K enthusiast, now we're going to pull in a little bit of the narrative. And we're going to look at the question, would you like to see Games Workshop support something more in this direction? And it's a way for them to make more money. Likewise, it's kind of out there right now, and technically nothing's stopping you from doing this in your own games. I mean, 40K is a narrative. The rules are optional. We can create whatever we want. And a lot of games that I played have been fantastic straight from the rule book. A lot of other games were like, let's sit down and create a narrative. Let's create something fun to utilize our models. But I find when you go off script, you really need to be in agreement ahead of time. You really need to, it takes a certain kind of player to want to go off script and to accept that it might not quite work out. And, that's okay because we don't always have to win. So I feel like when you go off script with 40K, if you had some rules, if you had some concrete pointers that you could follow, then it makes it easier to accept. And I'm not even talking about balance. It doesn't have to necessarily be balanced. I mean, this is Games Workshop. Nothing's balanced. But let's look at this idea of what is standard Warhammer 40,000? What does 40K look like at this moment? For the most part, it's you have your army, I have my army. We have different factions. We show up on the table, and for the most part, there's the stuff you control and the stuff that I control. And we go head to head, we play a mission, we roll some dice, we have some fun. What we saw with Blackstone Fortress, and this is what intrigued me. Intrigued me. And I'm trying to think right now if there's been other 40K examples. If there are, sound off in the comments, absolutely. But what we saw in 40K what we saw in Blackstone Fortress, which was the first Warhammer quest set in the 40K universe, you took the various models, and with the data sheets, you were able to use them in regular 40K games. So there was this idea, and I don't think Games Workshop did that necessarily because, like, hey, this would be really cool. You're going to go out and drop $195 on Blackstone Fortress, and if you play the Imperium, you can use the models in your game. And it was kind of cool to play the Men of Iron for a little while there. I think it was more like Games Workshop did that because they were looking back in the day when Space Hulk, the re-release for Space Hulk, everyone bought that and sold out because everyone's like, I want those Terminators for my army. Tyranid players were like, Spacebug players were like, I want those Gene Stealers, in my army, Broodlords and fantastic. Yeah, I'm going to play Space Hulk, but I'm going to commit that heresy and scratch off all that Blood Angel stuff and make it my own Marine chapter with those Terminators. I mean, the Terminator kits at the time, they were very, very impressive, but nothing like Space Hulk. Even to this day, they kind of command a premium and they look amazing. And at this point, it's like 10 or even longer years in terms of a release. So from that perspective, I think they were thinking, well, 40K players are going to buy anything. They'll buy Blackstone Fortress because you want to get in with the models. You want to use them in your regular games. I think that's the motivation. But what I found interesting and that we experimented a little bit with the Amble and the Zotes, bringing the Zotes back, you had stats, you had models. What if there was like an AI or in 40K, a third player faction supported by the rules? This idea that you could be battling it out and on the table in a building or appropriate terrain piece, there's one of these AI features. So let's say you're playing on a death world and there's the Amble. It's the model. Well, you're going to pay $65 for the model, and it comes with a little deck of cards. And randomly, you roll for mission, you set everything up, you're ready to go. As part of the terrain, it appears randomly in that terrain. And maybe then when it appears, now it activates, and every other turn, or at the end of the bottom of every player's turn, you flip over an AI card and you resolve it. It attacks here, it goes there, burrows under the ground, it kind of looks at different things. That could be kind of cool, where now you have to contend with this other model, which Games Workshop is going to charge you $65 for. And that would be, now again, nothing's stopping us from doing that. I mean, I have played games where We played a game where it was 2 Space Marine chapters going against each other, and there was a bunch of Dark Angels that beamed down to kind of get this relic from the Unforgiven, and I played 2 Dark Angel squads as the GM, as the game master, where it was for the narrative. I mean, we've seen this idea, nothing is stopping you from playing a narrative-based game, but the challenge with that is you need a GM. You need someone to control that faction or those pieces, and they're there not to win. They're there not to, like, king make meta game secretly. They're going to team up and fight their friends, so none of that to play fairly. Well, what if you had the rules to do that? So now I would show up with my 40K army that I paid thousands of dollars for. I'm going to show up with my 40K approved terrain, but then I'm going to have a figure box of 40K extra /AI /NPCs /models that I'd love to throw those down. I'd love to be able to play with an automated AI that moves through. I mean, that would be a lot of fun. That would be a lot of fun to play. And I think there is room when we look at some of the source books, especially the early editions, 3rd edition, 4th edition, there's a lot of stuff mentioned. I mean, looking at Blackstone Fortress, pulling back Zotes, pulling back the Amble to actual make models of these monsters. I think there was an Amble model in Rogue Trader, and I think it was like really, really small in scale. But in pulling those in, is there money to be made? Is there something untapped for 40K, something that Games Workshop could now sell you a 3rd model line to purchase? I'd like to see something like that, and I would love to be able to have a box to bring of like 10 or 15 of these things to play, just randomly to play in games and have some fun, roll some dice, and if it's technically supported by Games Workshop, and I didn't make it up, even though it's not play tested and balanced, I think it would be easier. I think it would be easier to accept the results.